2, 1.
Good evening. My name is Councillor John Todd and I'm the chair of the Chiswick Area Forum. It's now just past 7 o'clock, and so I'd like to welcome you all to this second virtual meeting of this area forum. I would like to welcome the members who are sitting this evening, presenters, as well as council officers who will be assisting members throughout the meeting. In addition, of course, I'd like to welcome members of the public who are watching this meeting at home. The way this meeting will work will be that as chair, I'll be running the meeting and inviting people to speak. As it's very easy for people to speak over each other in meetings like this, I will ask each member or officers to speak in turn at the appropriate stage. This will mean there'll be normally no need for people to interrupt or ask to speak. However, I will of course make sure that members have ample opportunity to ask questions and make comments on the reports and applications before them. I will also ask members to always say who they are when they make a contribution and speak slowly and clearly for the same reason. I would now like to introduce each of the members here tonight one by one. I will start. My name is Councillor John Todd, as I've already said, the chair of the area forum, and I'm one of the ward councillors for Chiswick Homefields. Can I then invite my colleagues to speak in alphabetical order? Can I ask Councillor Ranjit Gill?
Hi, I'm Ranjit Gill. I'm the Vice Chair for the Area Forum, and I'm also the Councillor for Turnham Green Ward alongside Joanna Bidoff and Ron Mishisha.
Thanks very much. Councillor Patrick Barr, please.
Good evening. My name is Councillor Patrick Barr. I'm Chiswick Councillor for Homefields, along with Councillor John Todd and Councillor Gerald McGregor. Good evening.
Thank you, Patrick. Councillor Joanna Bidoff, please.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Joanna Bidoff and I'm one of the 3 councillors for Turnham Green Ward alongside Ranjit Gill and Ron Mishisha.
Councillor Michael Dennis. Okay, let's move on. Councillor Gabriella Giles, please.
Yes, sir.
Who's he?
You're mute, Mike.
Michael. Is he hiding?
I think he's struggling with video connection.
Let's move on then. Gabriella Giles. I'll go back to it. Come on, Gabriella.
Hi, I'm Gabriella Giles. I'm a councillor for Chiswick Riverside Ward, along with Michael Dennis and Sam Hearn, and I'm a member of this committee.
Sorry to overtalk you there, Michael. Councillor Sam Hearn.
Good evening. Councillor Sam Hearn. I'm one of the 3 councillors for Chiswick Riverside Ward, along with Gabriella Giles and Mike Dennis.
Gerald McGregor.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Gerald McGregor. I'm the councillor for Chiswick Homefields, alongside my colleagues, Councillor Patrick Barr and Councillor John Todd, who's chairing this evening's meeting. Okay,
thank you. Can I ask members to mute their microphone, please? I'm then going to invite the Area Participation Officer to speak. John Wyman White.
Sorry, Chair, can I introduce myself first?
Ron, do apologise.
No problem at all. Sorry, Councillor Ron Mishisha for Turnham Green, alongside my colleagues, Councillors Ranjit Gill and Councillor Joanna Bidoff.
Okay, egg on my face there, Ron. Okay. John Wyman White, please.
Thanks very much, Councillor. My name is John Wyman White. I work for the Council's Community Partnerships Unit, and this evening I'm going to be assisting Councillor Todd in the running of the meeting as what we call the Area Participation Officer.
John, thank you very much. Chasbel Sandhu, please.
Hello, I'm Chasbel Sandhu. I'm here to support the meeting from Democratic Services.
Thank you very much, Chasbel. And finally, Jyoti Patel.
Hello, my name is Jyoti Patel and I'm also from Committee Services here to support the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Members of the public are reminded that the agenda and all the items being discussed by the Area Forum tonight can be found on the Council website under the Chiswick Area Forum meetings page. So if you want to see them, that is where to look. Also, make sure that all members have seen the agenda. Please now speak if you haven't seen the agenda. No answer.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I have.
Okay, thanks, colleagues. Finally, I would like to say that any member of the public listening or watching, thank you for joining us this evening. We hope that the meeting will go well, but any virtual meeting may suffer from unexpected technical hitches, so bear with us. I should also like to point out the meeting is being recorded and it will be made available on the Council's YouTube channel in the next few days. Contributors to the meeting are asked to remember that they will therefore be included in the recording of this public meeting. A quick note about submitting questions for this meeting. For residents watching this meeting, it is possible to submit questions via the Q&A function on MS Teams during the meeting itself. Select Q&A on the right side of the screen and type your question in the composed box and then select send. If you would prefer to ask your question anonymously, select ask anonymously. Members will try to answer as many questions as they can on the night. Thank you. We now move to the first item on the agenda. Are there any apologies for absence, colleagues?
No.
No.
Okay. Well done. Thanks very much. Can we now go agenda item 2, the minutes of the last meeting, pages 3 to 5. I know Councillor Bidoff submitted some corrections. Are there any other issues members want to raise?
Councillor Todd,
Yes,
can I make a request that our minutes include a link to the recording of the meeting? For seeing as that's now public record as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gabriel. I've noted that and it'll be in minutes. Agenda item 3. Local policing update.
There's something to say.
I didn't hear.
Councillor Todd, Councillor Hearn would like to say something.
I do apologise. Councillor Hearn.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Item 4 on those minutes. I think they were very anodyne. I don't think they reflected fully the, let's call it anger, but people's feelings, the people who were in the meeting, their feelings about the traffic measures.
I agree.
What is Jeff?
Well, they weren't that, it wasn't that comprehensive. There's nothing wrong with them. They just weren't very comprehensive. I'd just leave that as a comment, John. I'm not suggesting any additions.
Okay, well, to be fair, another colleague has made a very good point. You recall, I think we had hundreds of questions, and I'm reassured that those questions and answers are published elsewhere on the council's website. So what I propose to do is to include that link in the minutes to give a sort of continuity there. But I agree with your sentiment, Sam, but I think what we were concerned about is having 100 pages plus of questions and answers from the previous meeting. I hope that partially assuages your concerns there.
Yes.
Yes or no? Okay.
Yes. I think Councillor Bidoff has got a question.
Come on.
Yeah,
Councillor Bidoff, sorry.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I think I agree with Sam, and I think there should be at least a sentence that records the sentiment of the event, which was not as calm and as peaceful and anodyne, as, to use Sam's word, as is reported. I just think a sentence should be included to explain the depth and strength of local feeling.
Frustration and anger, I totally agree, yes.
Yeah.
I think, okay, I agree with that, and we'll do that, but okay. I think some of that frustration and anger was reflected in the questions and answers too, wasn't it? Certainly in the questions.
Yeah.
They were very probing, detailed questions from members of the public, which really added value to the meeting, in my view. Yeah. But that's a very good point. if members are happy with that, can I move on to agenda item 3 then, please?
Yes.
Fine. You'll see it's a local policing update. Members have been provided with a report later this afternoon, but unfortunately Sergeant Rich, who was due, is operationally engaged in some COVID exercise, so he can't attend, which is very, very unfortunate. Subject to your view, I propose to advise those watching that the policing report is on the internet, and to invite members of the public who wish to raise questions about the content of that report to email in, and we'll make sure that each and every question is answered by the police. Will members approve that suggestion? Anyone against?
Yes.
Agreed. Yes, agreed.
Thank you very much indeed for your help. I'm delighted to move on now to agenda item 4 and introduce Anthea Avanakis, who's the director of Chiswick House, to speak.
Sorry, Chair. Could we, Councillor Sam Hahn?
Sam.
Interject.
I misheard you, John, but I got one comment, and that is the paragraph on knife crime. Given the extent of the concern that there was about that, certainly a year ago, 2 years ago, but basically it would be worth minuting either that we're pleased or just noting that there are no knife crimes reported in the period covered by this report. So if the police were here, it would be worth interrogating them, but we're pleased that there isn't any knife crime being reported.
Well, I think it's a bold statement. The fact I noted that too. There are no knife offences at all, which is very good. There's still a large number of assaults though, which you could. Anyway, okay, I'm happy to do that, Sam. Of course, we know that, but the tragedy is it's a 14-page report. There's a lot of detail there about burglaries and related offences, and it's a tragedy that we can't have a broader Q&A with the officer concerned.
It's noted. It's been noted before the meeting by Joe, Councillor Joe Bidoff, that this is not the first time this has happened. I think partly the fault, if Chaspel could take this back, partly is the fault of other area forums which have traditionally not had the police attending their meetings. We've always tried very hard to have the police there so the public can ask questions, and I think it's a message that needs to be reinforced. I accept there are operational reasons why we don't have Mr. Reagan with us today, but it's, you know, we value that, and I think the public, when they are attending, value that.
Chair.
Ranjit, Councillor,
yeah, you know, we've had 2 big police meetings with the residents, and which have been very successful. So I'm proposing, once all the restrictions are lifted, I'll arrange another meeting for our residents to raise various questions that they need with the police, and the police to attend the meeting, because the previous 2 meetings have had very good response from the residents, and we've had about 200 residents attending those meetings each time. So I think we should arrange another meeting in future. Thank you.
Councillor Mashisha.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, just to go back onto the police report. We picked up a couple of caseworks with regards to bike theft, and I just wanted to put on the record that I will be emailing back to in response to the report here, just to follow up to see what provisions are in place to tackle that slow increase of bike theft that was being reported to us in Turnham Green.
Okay, that's very helpful, thanks. I certainly agree with Councillor Bidoff. The attendance has been variable, and it's a major gap. And I certainly think perhaps we should go up a rank, or make sure that if the sergeant can't come, the inspector can come. But we can't carry on having this variable absence. Yeah, Councillor Bidoff, your hand's up.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And the other issue is that I promoted this meeting quite widely on the basis that the police would be attending, because I've had quite a few representations about enforcement during the pandemic, and there is a role for the police in enforcement. It's not just our enforcement officers who are dealing with it. So I suggested to quite a lot of people that they would have a chance to ask questions here in the chat or through us. And I think they need to realise that the agenda is an important document, and if they're on the agenda, it's a commitment. As far as is possible, obviously, if there's a last-minute drama, that's a different thing.
Yeah, I agree.
It's embarrassing to promote it to others and then find that it's dropped from the agenda.
I readily agree with that.
Somebody should have stepped in anyway, I think, from the police, you know.
Well, can I say in mitigation, Clark was on the phone or emailing Sergeant Rich virtually every other day. At least we got a report, some variable which can't really explain. But we'll certainly take it back as strongly oppose this current behaviour. Okay. Anyone else wish to speak on that subject?
Chair, just to let you know, we've had one question come in from the public, which I've just published. I hope you can see that. The question is, are any of the LTNs impacting crime?
Any observations, colleagues?
I have raised this issue with the ward police panel in Chiswick Riverside regarding the closure of Harvard Hill, as there were some observations of, should we say, antisocial behaviour taking place at that junction, and they hadn't found any conclusive evidence as to yes or no. But I'm sure that I can take that and follow up with the local ward police in Chiswick Riverside, and I'm sure my fellow councillors will do the same with their own ward police panels in their own wards.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we have a further question. The shame that police are not here. Policing is important given the lack of discipline by cyclists, from Mr. Waterston. Okay, well, again, we'll take those back. Any more questions, colleagues? Sam, your mouth.
It's not a question, John, but we were promised under the original Cycleway 9 scheme that there would be 26 wardens from TfL, and I've seen absolute who would be enforcing on, at least on Cycleway 9. But we've seen nothing about that with this experimental measure, and it would be, the police would be presumably liaising with those enforcement officers, but it seems what we've got is on the cheap, I think. So we're not getting enforcement.
Okay. That's a good point. We can raise that.
Yeah. And Chair, sorry, can I just recommend that everybody sign up to OWL, which is the online watch system, so that everybody's aware and is being emailed alerts if there are any issues of concern regarding the police. And it's basically the new version of the neighbourhood watch scheme, which if you Google OWL, you'll find it pretty easily. But I would thoroughly recommend you all sign up for those notifications.
Okay, I have a question here from Ruth Mayorkas. She did send it in last night, and I got a question from the police sergeant. It's about the safety of cyclists and enforcing the law. I know Sergeant Rich said that it's not their highest priority, but he didn't expand much further on that. Okay, well, can I please move on now to agenda item 4?
Yeah.
And great pleasure to introduce Xanthia Varkas, who's the director of Chiswick House, to present. I think we have a problem without a picture, so I no doubt we look forward to hearing from you, Xanthia.
Yes. Hi, John. I'm really sorry. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Great. Okay. Was it a bit more like the radio then than a live broadcast? I'm really sorry about that. We've just had a technical issue we've been trying to solve all afternoon and have not been able to solve it. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me to the Chiswick Area Forum meeting this evening. I was just going to talk a little bit about my first 11 months in the job. Can you believe it? It's almost the first year, and it's certainly been a bit of a roller coaster year, and tell you a bit about what we've been up to throughout the crisis and where next. So if I just start from the beginning, so as John said, my name is Xanthi Arvanitakis, and I was absolutely delighted to be appointed Director of Chiswick House and Gardens Trust earlier in the year. I have worked previously in cultural heritage organisations for over 7 years, but also having grown up and lived locally, I have been a very regular visitor, and Chiswick House and Gardens has certainly been one of my kids' favourite places. So it really was genuinely a dream job for me. Clearly, when I started last year on the 3rd of March, I wasn't expecting to be thrown straight into crisis management, but that is what sort of unfolded in my first few weeks. So very rapidly, we had to make some quite difficult decisions. We had to, as I'm sure many of those watching will know, that we were able to keep the grounds open, but we had to close the conservatory and playground, cut our popular Camellia show short, and postpone the reopening of the house. What also unfolded is that during March and April, we lost all our income from our weddings and our partner event activity, but we were able to secure our grants from the council, so from London Borough of Hounslow and English Heritage, but they only cover around a quarter of our costs. So we then had to make some really tough decisions. I had to furlough half our team and continue to cut our costs because we had a very large hole in our budget of around £500,000. But we wanted to commit to keeping the gardens open, and we still had the responsibility to continue with all our essential maintenance. So it did mean we needed to urgently raise funds to bridge the gap. So as I'm sure many of those watching or listening this evening will remember, we launched our fundraising campaign in May to raise £120,000 in 120 days to try and plug some of that gap. And we started to apply for multiple emergency grants to help us through this period. We were able to get the cafe reopened for takeaway business. And we also, one of our local groups, Chiswick House Friends, launched a fundraiser to also support us and help raise funds for our running costs. And what unfolded over the summer, unsurprisingly, and many of my colleagues running similar organisations and outdoor spaces across London experienced the same thing, that we saw approximately 80% more visitors than usual coming to visit every day. And we were delighted to be able to provide that sanctuary for all our local community. But clearly that had created its own challenges of increased wear and tear and litter, and the challenge of sort of managing that and keeping our staff and ground contractors safe. We made a commitment to maintain and harvest our kitchen garden so that we could continue to support the local food bank, which we did do on our what was at that point a skeleton team, as we no longer had our volunteers on site. But everyone pulled together and we kept going. In July, again, as I'm sure people remember, as the country started to unlock, we put together a programme of activity to continue to bolster our fundraising, but also to thank everyone that had supported and rallied around us so far. So we ran numerous events, from our plant fundraiser to a festival of music and comedy, and we had an outdoor cinema as well. And we were able to get our volunteer gardeners back in a COVID secure way during the summer, and we continue to fundraise. But just as things were looking more positive, we found, following a health and safety inspection in preparation for getting our playground reopened, that it was not safe to reopen. So we had to, the playground had to remain closed. I have to say, from a personal point of view, and certainly as a parent, it was quite a bleak day when we got that news. But on a more positive note, we continued to fundraise, and we planned an auction at the end of the summer, at the end of September. And we did successfully, with the support of everyone from our local community, all those that helped, all our volunteers, the Chiswick Auctions team helped us with our auction. We were able to raise over 125,000 in the end, which really helped to plug the gap. And throughout, we were able to keep the gardens open. And then, very excitingly, in October, we heard that we had finally been successful with one of our grant applications, and we'd secured a culture recovery fund, which enabled us to invest in getting the house, Chiswick House, ready to reopen for April this year. We did launch our 10-year business plan, and we invited all to feedback, and we did get some really helpful feedback. Between October and Christmas, so over the last 3 or 4 months, we were able to build a project team to start working on planning the reopening of the house for this year, but we also put on a Christmas market, which I think was really quite successful. On a positive note, we were also able to start the process of planning the repair of some of the old playground kit so that we're able to get that open this year as well. So in terms of where we are today, well, we're in the middle of our third lockdown, as we all know. The gardens remain open, which is great, and we've done our best to keep them maintained to the best of our ability so that they're for everyone to enjoy them. Unfortunately, the conservatory and, as I said, the playground remain closed, but we are able to now start to plan to get the playground ready for reopening in February and March. We also have a project team who are working in the background and preparing the house, getting it ready to reopen in late spring with new interpretation and community participation program, which is really exciting. Unfortunately, our volunteers are still on hold as we're in the middle of this crisis, but we are planning when we're able to restart our volunteering program, but also look at how we can expand that to support scaling up in the borough and seeing if we can create some employability opportunities as well. And we do still continue to fundraise. So I think I spend most of my time applying for grants to bridge that gap as we look to generate new income sources. So it's certainly been a rollercoaster year, and it was not probably what I was expecting to be doing in the first year of my job. But it's had its ups and it's had its downs, but we've got there, and we couldn't have done it without the support of our local community. So I really wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of those who have supported us throughout the last 11 months. So that's everything I've got to say, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Xanthia. Can I ask John if there are any questions from members of the public via Teams?
Yes, there is. There's one here. It's anonymous. Cargo delivery bikes are using Chiswick House and Park as part of the delivery route. Is that allowed? I'm not sure it's actually.
That's the first I've heard of that. So if someone wants to send me some more information, I've certainly not noticed that myself, but I can look into that. I mean, the park itself has a bike route, which is essentially on the tarmacked paths around the edges of the grounds. So I'm not sure we could certainly enforce commercial bikes not to use it, but it's not something I've also had any feedback on. So do send me any more information. I'll have a look into that.
We'll certainly do that, Cynthia. We'll now take questions from my colleagues. Can I remind them that introduce themselves every time you speak and turn off their microphones when you've finished. So can I invite Councillor Ranjit Gill, please? Any questions, Ranjit?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, just want to thank Xanthia for the presentation. It was really good, and also the fact that Chiswick House has provided a sanctuary for all the residents, and you got to about 80%. You've been open 80%, and also you have done well by attending the Chiswick Flower Market too on 3 occasions, which you have made your presence felt. So I think that was really good too, and the people who were running the store were really helpful and forthcoming with information, and I think it was a great success. So really, thank you, and I'm sorry you got your position at almost when COVID started, and you've done great. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciated.
Thank you, Ranjit. Councillor Barr, please. Any questions? I can't hear any noise. Patrick, can I move on to Councillor Joanna Biller, please?
Yes, I haven't got any questions, Chair. Just
Okay.
like to, as others have said, to congratulate you on managing the pandemic so well.
Yeah,
Thanks
you.
Or the effects of the pandemic, obviously.
Yes.
Councillor Dennis, any issues, please?
Yeah, first of all, can you all hear me? Excellent, thank you. I just a comment and a question. I echo my fellow councillors. I just wanted to commend you on the very inspired way you kept Chiswick Park really alive for the residents, and that's been particularly important over this period. And I've certainly benefited in the past from weddings at the venue, and I can say that it is very well done indeed, and I look forward to one day having one there myself. Yeah, the cafe's been going there with the extra cafe bit there, with the little kiosk, and that's an inspired choice too. And lots of children really taking advantage of that. The only question I had was, what roughly monthly or weekly, what are the running costs of Chiswick House to keep us open, if you're able to disclose that?
Yeah, so our budget on a typical year is between 1.3 to 1.4 million pounds, but obviously that cost includes some of the staff who then operate the commercial business. So during this year, by sort of reverting back to essential costs only, we reduced our operating costs, but that was by also furloughing half the team, so it left us with a pretty skeleton team. We were able to reduce our costs by approximately £200,000. But I think, you know, we run very we have a lot of responsibility, and I think this is, you know, I've been learning this as I've been trying to manage this through the crisis, because not only are we keeping the grounds clean, safe and open, but because of the range of Chiswick House itself and all the other statutory and scheduled as Grade 1 listed monuments that we've got in the grounds, we have a number of other responsibilities from a security point of view, a maintenance point of view, etc. So as a sort of machine that we're trying to operate, it's quite a costly affair, put it that way.
Yes, yes, I'm sure.
I think our biggest challenge, and one that we're trying to fundraise for, to make sure not only do we bridge the deficit that we've incurred by our loss of commercial income this year to keep us going throughout the year, but also to try and fundraise to enable us to do that outreach work, which is absolutely vital as well, in terms of supporting the wider community in the borough. So there's two things that are going on. We're sort of looking at how we can generate our income to cover our operating costs and enable us to keep doing what we're doing, but also trying to fundraise so that we can make investments as well in our community outreach work. So that's a sort of two-pronged approach that we're doing, we continue to work on at the moment.
Lovely. Thank you very much for answering my question.
Councillor Todd, apologies, Councillor, no questions.
Yes, thank you, Patrick, very helpful. Councillor Gabriella Giles.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think it's probably worth noting that there is a bit of delay when you're on the phone trying to unmute. So Xanthi, thank you so much for your presentation, as much as it was for elaborating on what you've been doing with Chiswick House. I think, like many of us who live locally, we've really benefited from it hugely over the last 9 months, and I'm glad that you highlighted the fact that there are specific cycle routes in the park. I think for many of us who learnt to cycle in the park, we may not be aware that there are only certain paths that you should and shouldn't access if you're then cycling around the park. There was a question, I know there's been a lot of consternation around dogs on leads within the park and what is allowed and what is not over the pandemic period. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, so I mean, we welcome everyone. So whether you're a cyclist, jogger, walker, family member, or dog walker, We are open and accessible to all. I think in terms of the dog code guidance, there is information at every gate and around where you pick up your the dog waste bags that we make available to everyone and any dog walker in the grounds. And there are certain areas where we do ask people to have dogs on shorter leads, which are around the cafe, and I think there's some signs around that. So there is a sort of code at the gate. How visible that is and whether we can improve the visibility of that is something we can certainly look at if that's something that local residents are concerned about. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything more to add.
No, I think that's fine.
Does that answer the question? I'm sorry, I'm not sure I've answered the question.
It's more about promoting what you already have in place rather than chastising not having done certain things. Yeah, and sorry.
Yes, I mean, I was just going to say I agree. I've been looking at the signage and at the point that we can invest, that's something we want to try and improve. We have quite a lot of dense signage at the gates, but I'm not sure it's that readable, and that's something that we will look at improving.
Yeah, sorry, I keep on forgetting you can't actually see my reactions, so apologies. Yeah. And then from us as like local councillors and as the local council and speaking with residents, what would you like us to promote on behalf of Chiswick House and grounds?
Well, I mean, I think where we're going to need support is we are going to have to continue a cycle of fundraising. There is no doubt about that. It is very, very unlikely that our events business, but either the private events, so weddings or commercial events, are going to recover in 2021 to the same level. So we will be continuing to actively fundraise. We are launching, as I said, we will get the playground reopen, but it will be with a minimum intervention to make it safe and take out the kit that's broken and replace some of the kit that can be replaced. But in doing that, we will then also continue to fundraise to try and make further improvements for families in the ground. So I suppose I ask all of you to promote to your constituents to continue to enjoy the grounds and support where you can.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. That's all from me.
Thanks very much. Councillor Hearn.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. I very much enjoyed the auction, and it enabled me to get a ride on Jeremy Vine's penny farthing. But perhaps the less said about that, the better. But very much look to forward to another auction, even though I probably won't be able to afford any of the auction items. But it was very exciting to be involved in that auction. I'd recommend that to anybody. Will you be working? Will the trust be a visible presence on the Blossom Day event that local residents, including me, are hoping to run on in April?
Yes, absolutely. We were contacted by, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the person who's leading on that, and it is in our calendar. We will definitely get involved.
Thank you. And I saw in the press that the government are unlocking insurance policies and pensions, which nobody's claiming. There's about £800 million in there, and that's supposedly being released for charities and deserving causes. Is that on your radar?
No, but I will definitely look into that.
There's somebody called John Glenn, the Economic Secretary, who, if you're good.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Councillor Hearn. Gerald McGregor, please.
Chair, good evening, and just to say thank you very much to Xanthi for the presentation. Very energetic, very useful, and she shows a great deal of command of the subject. I look forward to seeing her again sometime in the future. Hopefully her first 11 months, which have been a baptism of fire, will not continue in the same vein, and we'll get back to some normality. When we're back to normal, we'd like to hear more about your plans when you've got a proper budget and you don't have to do things from hand to mouth. I've got no questions, but I just want to say thank you very much for attending and for giving us the benefit of your knowledge and expertise.
My pleasure, and thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Romashita, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I was over at Chiswick House over the summer on a couple of occasions, and it was obviously we just about recovered from COVID-19 before the summer was out. And so I read that the leisure industry and the hospitality industry will probably be the last to recover. And therefore, we will need to be as COVID secure as possible for when that recovery does come. So I guess my question is twofold. Being that we have really now harnessed the community spirit around Chiswick and Hounslow, how can we tap into that community spirit to show love for Chiswick House in the way of, perhaps, as you mentioned at the beginning, with bringing back your volunteers to make the gardens and the grounds as beautiful as they can, so we can continue to love Chiswick House, so that when it recovers, it is working at its best possible shape.
Yes, well, it was with great reluctance that we had to put our volunteer programme on hold, but it's not easy, and we're always trying to get the balance right between keeping our volunteers safe and keeping our staff safe as well. But as soon as we can, we will be restarting our volunteer programme, and we are also planning on expanding it. So what we want to do is to expand the opportunity for more people to volunteer, not necessarily just in gardening roles. We're looking at other roles that may be of interest to support in all sorts of areas. For example, supporting on the retail side, so running the veg cart, for example, that comes out twice a week, or very specific roles, harvesting vegetables, not just gardening. So we've got all sorts of ideas on how we want to expand the programme, and then clearly with the reopening of the house, there'll be lots of volunteering opportunities, both in the house as room guides or leading tours, or volunteering in the shop, in the house, etc. So watch this space.
Yeah, do let us know, and we hopefully can advertise that, and hopefully some of us here in the room would volunteer to support.
I hope so.
I'll certainly put my hand up for that.
Great, thank you.
Well, thanks very much indeed, Xanthia. That's a very comprehensive presentation. I'm very sorry we can't see you, but we'll make sure we do that next time. Once again, thank you for coming and staying behind to give us a very informative and helpful presentation. I'm very, very grateful on behalf of all my colleagues.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thanks.
Colleagues, can we move on to agenda item 5 now, please? And can I have great delight to introduce Laura Eleanor, the head teacher of Chiswick School, to present. Good evening, Laura.
Good evening. I'm going to just share my screen with everybody.
Okay, thank you.
If somebody could give me a thumbs up when it's there, that would be great.
It's on the screen. Yep.
Are we there?
Yes, we are.
Great.
Yeah, I think if you can maximise it, that will.
Okay.
That'll
do.
There we go.
We've lost it again.
Can you see it now?
No.
No. Okay, just bear with me.
There's a piece of paper flying past your left ear.
No, we've got an email.
Laura, we can actually see your screen.
Yep, that's fine. It's fine.
yeah, just as long as it's nothing
No,
we should be
it's
seeing.
nothing too exciting. It should just be coming up now. There we go. Can we see that?
Very small.
No, maybe it's coming now.
There's a delay. It's coming up.
Yeah. Oh, the beauties of running meetings online. I think we've all been in this situation, Laura.
There we go. Are we there?
No,
not
quite.
Laura, our comms person, Moina, she does have your presentation. If you prefer for her to share it, and then you can just let her know when to skip to the next slide.
Yeah, okay, that would be fine. Let me just take this one down then.
Could you share the presentation, Moina, please?
Can everybody see me?
Yes.
Or my presentation?
We, as Councillor Hearn said, there is something in to the left of your ear that keeps on coming in and out of shot, like a flying piece of paper.
Not on my screen.
No, I think it's disappeared now, but I think it keeps on making an appearance.
So am I waiting for somebody to do it from your end, or would you like me to do it?
No, we can see it now. It's now on the screen.
No, that's not mine, unfortunately.
Ah.
That's COVID-19. That's Kelly's.
That is Kelly's, I think.
Yeah.
You could deliver that one, Laura. I'm sure you'd make a good job of it.
Should I have one more go at sharing it?
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
Yep.
We're there now.
It's now on the screen.
Great.
It's on the screen.
Yeah, full screen. Perfect.
Okay. So I'm not going to touch anything because I can't see it, but I know what's there. But you can see it, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So I will just have to do a Chris Whitty and a next slide, please. But I'm hoping that everybody can hear me and now see the screen clearly. And thank you for bearing with me. It was a real pleasure to be invited to come and talk to you this evening. And I know that it's been a couple of years since I was at this forum when I had just started as the head teacher of Chiswick School. So my name is Laura Eleanor. And I am the head teacher at Chiswick School. Some of you will know a little bit about the school. You may not know that in January last year, before COVID arrived on our doorstep, Ofsted arrived on our doorstep, and we were delighted that they found Chiswick School to be a good school with outstanding personal development, and we were very proud of that. We have around 120 staff at the school and just under 1,300 students. We were really pleased last September to add another class to Year 7 because we had record numbers of primary school children applying for a school place. And I think when I spoke at the forum last time, I mentioned that putting the secondary school at the heart of the community was one of the things that I really wanted to do. And I feel we're moving towards that goal. Our attendance this year has been quite remarkable despite the pandemic. You measure attendance from September to the end of the academic year, and we were recording about 94% attendance, which was hugely above the national average. And I think that demonstrates that we now have a captive audience with the students that are attending the school, which is really fantastic. We have around 330 students who are entitled to free school meals, and 40% of our cohort are disadvantaged. And I'll talk to you a bit later on in the presentation about how we have supporting that part of our community. When COVID arrived on our doorstep from March, we very quickly developed extensive risk assessments, which are updated monthly. And we put in a great deal of work at the start of the pandemic adapting our classrooms, knocking walls down, so that when we arrived back in September, we could welcome our students who we had missed during that first lockdown period. And we spent all of the summer holiday getting the school ready for that, putting 2-metre lines down. As I've said, we knocked a few walls down to make our classrooms bigger, and many other measures that schools up and down the country have put in place to keep staff and students and their families as safe as possible. The main challenges for us as a school are around the enormous amount of guidance that we get, often at the end of a school term or on Friday at 8 o'clock at night or the day before or the morning before, and the fact that as school leaders we hear about the latest policy changes when everybody else hears about them. So when we are listening to Boris talking on the news about schools, we're hearing for the first time what's going to happen. So schools are having to react very quickly and nimbly to whatever is said at those briefings and change plans very quickly. Clearly, we have a whole group of students again who have just had their examinations cancelled, and that's a challenge for us, that there's no backup plan at the moment, but I believe a consultation is coming out on Friday, and we will obviously be responding to that and supporting those students who will not get to have that rite of passage. And I'd just like to commend those students who are still working incredibly hard in their lessons every day, aiming towards getting some good academic results. And of course, another challenge is ensuring that our community is safe during this time and making sure that we're safeguarding all of our children and to some extent our teachers and our families. So I think we can probably move on to the next slide, and I'll talk to you a little bit about teaching and learning during the pandemic. We learned so much during lockdown 1. We threw ourselves into it, and I think we were among the 5% of state schools that began live lessons in that first wave of school closure. We had a fantastic response from staff. We welcomed key worker children from many other schools who came to Chiswick. We had some children from special schools who joined in with us every day, and we stayed open throughout the holidays to accommodate those children, as well as delivering a remote curriculum that included those live lessons that I've mentioned. We've managed to be able to retain our fantastic staff and recruit well, and staff that have had to self-isolate through being a close contact have even delivered lessons when we returned back from that period of lockdown from their front rooms to packed classes in Chiswick School, because they didn't want to miss any of that teaching. And feedback from parents has been very positive. I send out something called a pulse survey every 3rd week of term, which asks parents and carers to give us some feedback so that we can listen to that and learn from that. And while it's really lovely to get those positive messages, it's also good to have suggestions and other things that we haven't thought about put to us so that we can continue learning. So if I talk for a moment about this lockdown, we were expecting Year 11 back yesterday with Year 13, but unfortunately that wasn't to be. And then the rest of the school was due to be with us on the 18th. And with a day's notice, we managed to get our entire timetable up using Google Classroom, and our teachers are delivering a full timetable of live lessons. So a student in Year 7 will have exactly the same day that they would do if they are in school, although they are having their teacher deliver the lesson live through the computer every day, which I think is really helping parents, actually, because we know that lots of our parents work, and that having to keep working with their children every 5 minutes is so difficult. I know that my husband is certainly finding it a huge challenge at the moment, suddenly being a teacher, and so we feel that this strategy is the right one for our schools. Of course, we use other resources within our live lessons. Oak National Academy is a fantastic resource, and I know that some primary schools are using that, because often live teaching isn't the best way, and we may stay live for 20 minutes and then set some work so that the children don't have to spend those 6 hours looking at the computer screen. But up and down the country, schools have been very nimble in reacting to getting their curriculum online, and teachers are working hard, delivering exactly the same curriculum that we would be if we were in school. If we could have the next slide, please. It's been really fantastic. Last week and this week we have run virtual Zoom meetings for our parents so that we can support them, and they have a chance to ask us any questions, and we can clear up any misconceptions and give them some help if they need it. And one of a group that all schools are interested in are those students who are disadvantaged, and making sure that they don't fall even further behind than they are at this stage in all secondary schools. And I think that it's important to note that there is a lot of comparison between state schools and private schools at the moment, especially in the media. And state schools are serving a very different community, and both different groups of schools, of course, have their challenges. But some primary schools I know in Hounslow have still got up to a third, a half of the children remaining in school. So they're having to balance teaching children in school as well as delivering a remote curriculum outside of school. And I think that is a particular challenge for state education at the moment. So we delivered materials such as workbooks and equipment to our disadvantaged families, and an army of teachers drove around Hounslow delivering laptops and free school meal packages. And I'm very grateful to all the staff at Chiswick School who have gone absolutely above and beyond. Once we were more au fait with what was going on and the government got their voucher system up and running, we were able to provide vouchers to all our disadvantaged families. And we have given many laptops to our students so that nobody is left behind, and anyone that contacts us from Chiswick School that has a problem with getting access, we've provided dongles to which allow them to get on the internet and to access our curriculum. And of course that fantastic chunk of money that we got from central government to support us with our national tutoring programme. So 60 of our students who are disadvantaged get to have that really amazing 1-to-1 or 3-to-1 tuition. And I must commend our SEND team who are working in small groups virtually, and also with the children that are in school still, to ensure that those children with special educational needs are supported as well. And if we move on to the next slide, which is around well-being. And this is clearly a huge issue for everybody at the moment, and everybody is finding it, I'm sure, incredibly difficult to cope. And I think young people in particular are finding this lockdown more difficult than the first, because I think they kind of know what to expect. And so we're really careful to check in on our students and to make sure that they are okay. We call some students daily or weekly, and our pastoral team work very hard to make sure that we're working with the other fantastic services that Hounslow offer to make sure that our children are safe. We had around 17 students who tested positive for COVID-19 from September, and around 14 staff. And I have to say that the local authority have been absolutely supportive, and especially Kelly from Public Health England, who you can ring her at midnight and she will answer and give you advice. And certainly at the beginning of this situation, when we were all feeling very new to it and anxious, she provided such a fantastic service to schools. And we began by isolating half our year 8s when we had a case. But as we became more au fait with managing the situation and adding things to our risk assessment, so all of our students and staff wore masks in school unless the windows were flung open, we ended up being able to not send hundreds of children home and isolate that to a small number. And reassuringly, we did not have any transmission at school, which was really, really pleasing, and I'm proud of that. Also, unfortunately, we do have children and families who have been affected by illness and also by bereavement, and some of our teachers and support staff are also going through a difficult time at the moment. And I think it's real credit to the staff at Chiswick School that during this whole time we have not had to have a single supply teacher come to our school, because our staff attendance has been so strong and staff are so committed to serving their local community. We've done lots of fun things as well. We appointed a director of fun, and it's her job to make sure that the children are having a nice time at school. It's quite a clinical environment, so we've managed to do beat the teacher quizzes. We've managed to fundraise an enormous amount of money. The children have come in fancy dress, and the staff. We had a Christmas fair before the lockdown measures came in. So we feel that the children have had a really great term despite everything, which is really good, and the staff as well. And we managed to source a virtual escape room, so we locked all the departments in the escape room, and I think it was the history department that got out first, and that was a good fun as well, and a way to keep our spirits up. So if we move on to the next slide, one of the things that we were asked to do by central government was to set up a facility to test our staff and our students returning to school using a lateral flow test. And Kelly may talk to you about this. I think she's speaking after I've finished. But I thought it would be interesting for you to see what that looks like. And the picture with the lots of tables is where we test staff. Staff come in once a week. They sit at the tables. There is a staff member at the front reading a script, and they do a lateral flow test. And then the booths that you see are for the students that are in school. They come in, and once a week again they do their COVID-19 test. Supported by our teachers and our support staff, and we're proud that we got that up and running, as well as delivering our curriculum. And the last slide, but one, if you move to that one, you can see how that lateral flow test looks, and we were really pleased because we are picking up positive cases using these tests, and then we direct them to a test centre where they have a PCR test, and we're really pleased that we're able to add another layer of safety to our school, because our teachers are happy to be in, happy to be working. I know there's been lots of noise in the media about teachers saying they're not doing this and not doing that. We've had none of that, and I'm very grateful to staff. And I think they are reassured by the fact that we are adding that extra layer of support. And then finally, my last slide, what's to come? We're so looking forward to the summer, when hopefully the agenda won't just be about COVID-19, and we can move our school to the heart of the community again, make sure that we are working hard to become better, and to make sure that we become the first choice school for Chiswick and beyond, and that we move to being truly outstanding. So that's all I have for my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Laura, thank you very much indeed. That was a consummate presentation. Very, very grateful. Can I ask my colleague if he has any questions from the public before I ask my colleagues?
Yes, we do have a few questions. Laura, I'll just read them out. The first one, what can Chiswick School do to ensure it becomes an outstanding school in the next Ofsted?
Well, I think we have managed to keep thinking about that, because that is obviously our goal. We were devastated that exams were cancelled. I totally understand why, but we were anticipating that we would have record results, which is something that we are determined to do. We had, I think, 4 students last year make their way to Oxford or Cambridge, and many others going to Russell Group universities. And this year that has increased enormously as well. And it's a real pleasure to see those offers coming through. Our personal development is already outstanding. That's the offer outside of the classroom, the extracurricular, the pastoral support. And we're really focused now on our academic standards. But my determination is that it isn't just the academic excellence that we're going for. I want children to love coming to Chiswick School and be really proud of their school. And I think that we are seeing that more and more. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. I have to say all of these questions are anonymous, otherwise I would actually read out the name of the person who sent them. The next question. Has Chiswick School had issues with pupils getting to school on time with the delays caused by the C9 to buses on Chiswick High Road?
So, I mean, every day we have had a handful of students that haven't been able to get to school. I'd like to say that was because of the issues around the buses, but it's probably more likely that they were a little bit slow getting out of bed. So we haven't found that to be too much of a problem. What we have found is we are now on duty after school, or we certainly were before this lockdown, for hours, making sure that our children got on separate buses according to their bubbles. We would travel on the buses with them, making sure that we were encourage them to wear their masks. And so we would be on duty with our lovely E3 drivers from about 2:45 till around 5. So that's obviously takes a lot of capacity from doing other things, but we got used to it, and actually it's a really nice time to speak to the children at the bus queue.
Okay, another anonymous question. Amazing number of laptops provided. How many were funded by the PTA and how many were funded by the DFE?
That's a really good question. So the DFE allocated us around 130 laptops, which is really great. And then we had an email saying we were only getting 28. But we have a fantastic school business manager who got on the phone to the company supplying them and somehow managed to negotiate that they gave us our original number. So we had lots from the DFE, which is fantastic. That really helped. And we also launched a fundraising drive. So the rest of those laptops have been purchased using the money that was raised, not just from the PTA, but also from the generous people in Chiswick that heard about our fundraiser, and it's made such a difference. So thank you very much for that, for those of you that have contributed to that fund.
And we have one last question. Is Chiswick School hit by the scandal embroiling Chartwell with substandard school meal provision? Can parents still get vouchers?
Yeah, so we are not, Chartwells do not work with us, and I have asked for a picture of the hampers that are leaving our school tomorrow, and I can confirm they do not look like the Chartwells. But, you know, the government have recommended a list of food that should be provided, and actually it is what Chartwells has provided. So I think it's very easy to point the finger at this provider, but actually we're following government guidelines, and I am pleased to say that the voucher scheme is up and running, because we have, you know, over 300 children with free school meals. Some live 3 miles from the school. To deliver a free school meal every day is impossible. So the voucher scheme, which is due back, I think, next week, will be definitely appreciated by families and by schools.
We have just one message that's come out, one last one. It's not a question, but I think I should read it out. I don't live in Chiswick, but had my daughter gone to Chiswick School, I would be very happy with what you have put in place. Congratulations on your achievements in these times and continue all your hard work. Thank you and keep safe.
Thank you very much.
Up the questions from the public.
Thank you.
Laura, that's very helpful. Can we move on to questions from my colleagues if they have any, please? Can I invite Councillor Ranjit Gill to raise any matters?
Thank you, Chair. Laura, that was an incredible presentation. Congratulations. It was just absolutely wonderful to hear the work you've done, especially in such trying times, and to achieve student turnout of 94% at a time like this. I think that is really superb, and you and your staff are doing such a great job. I mean, if I was attending a school like this, I'd be really happy and proud myself. And you know, I think it's just superb what you've done so far, and congratulations. You know, it's really good. What I wanted to ask you was, has the lockdown, has it had an impact on the mental health of the students coming to school?
I think that is a really good question, and we are seeing, I think, now that there are some students whose mental health has been affected, more so I think because they know what the lockdown is like now, so they can see that this isn't going to be over in a few weeks and that they are likely to be stuck inside again. But actually the most worrying trend that we saw was an increase in domestic violence, and I think that was a national picture. But our pastoral team are so fantastic, and we managed to safeguard our children very well. And we do lots of things in our PSHE curriculum to also support well-being and mental health.
Okay, my other question is, are you happy with the free school meals provided by the government to the students? Because if you read in the papers, there's a lot of talk about that. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, we think that we've got that sorted, and that everything's okay in that respect.
Thank you very much, and please continue with the
Councillor Barr.
I think he might be having problems with a link, John, because he's not.
Okay, so that's very helpful. Can I move on to you then, if you wouldn't mind?
Sure, yes. Thank you very much, Laura. Extremely interesting for someone who's not had children and don't.
Hello, I'm so sorry. It's just problems of getting back on and off the mute button. I do apologise. No questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Patrick.
This is all a subject that's really quite well. It's something I don't know much about. I've got two main points. One is, do you share your ideas with fellow heads? You know, the idea of having a director of fun, for example. I would have loved that in my. I think we had directors of no fun in my era, but there we are. So I'd just be interested to know if there is that sort of discussion going on across the borough and maybe beyond the borough. But also, what's your biggest pressure at the moment through COVID?
So we have a fantastic network in Hounslow, and Stephen Forbes and David Brocky at the local authority are brilliant at bringing us together. We have a network called Hounslow Education Partnership, and we meet every week at the moment, which is really reassuring. And I'm sure, like many other professions, we have a WhatsApp group and we're constantly sharing ideas with each other. So that's really very, very helpful. And we all work very closely together, and it's a great achievement now that all the secondary schools in Hounslow are good or outstanding. So Chiswick was pleased to join that party. And I think, if I'm being really honest, my biggest pressure, aside from worrying that my children are going to burst through the door behind me at the moment, is the masses of communication that I get, that I then have to deliver to staff, and I've got a fantastic leadership team, brilliant leaders at the school who go above and beyond. Particularly my deputy head, Jane Mills, is absolutely fantastic. She's been at the school for many years, since she was an NQT, and she's great at sharing that burden with me.
Good. Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis, do you have any comments or questions, please?
Thank you, Chair. No, I just wanted to say, just to commend you on your efforts to really lead the school and do everything you've been doing. I particularly like, when I was at school, I particularly like extracurricular activities. So the launch of the scheme there really appeals to me, and I think it will really benefit the students. So, you know, well done, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Councillor Gabriella Giles, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. I think every time you come to us, you have shown and demonstrated the hard work and effort that you've put into improving standards within the schools, whether it be from students wearing their ties properly to obviously now wearing their masks properly. I think that's a great progression and a sign of the times, should we say. So I've got a couple of questions. So the first one is, it's great to hear that you're doing events such as like the breakout room, or I've been investigating those for a party, and it seems really quite cool. But how is morale generally amongst the staff? Obviously, there's been quite trying on a lot of people. They're having to change modes, a lot of it last minute. Speaking to friends of mine who are teachers, I think this is probably one of their biggest strains. I think we hear a lot about the schools, we understand a lot about the pupils, but I'd like to understand what's going on there with the teachers. It's great that you're doing stuff with the kids around the masks and the bus part and the bus routes, and I know that's something you were doing when you first started as well. So what else is done to raise awareness amongst the pupils about not being able to congregate en masse outside of school? Obviously, because we know that younger people are more liable to be asymptomatic. And then again, the same questions I asked Anthony, what do you need from us as councillors to succeed?
So I think if we take the second question first, we do assemblies, we have tutor time where the children get to discuss things. So in terms of getting them to understand their social responsibilities, staff work very hard around that, and actually peer pressure has worked really well also. So the majority of our students understand the rules or the guidance, and they are often better at us than at encouraging their peers to join them in making sure that they are keeping everybody safe and going home. And I was, when I first joined the school, on the high roads many times a week, and now I pop down now and then and wave at them on the bus and kind of point sometimes to my face to get them to pull their masks up if they haven't got them on. But we're really proud of how far that's come, and the staff morale is really good. We had you know, I think when I joined the school, the previous September, nearly 30 staff had left the school, and this September, I think we had one member of staff who wanted to work in a special school who left. So staff want to work at Chiswick School now. They're proud of Chiswick School, and I have genuinely not had a single member of staff tell me they're not coming in, they're not doing this, they don't feel safe. And I've worked really hard to keep them informed, to listen to them, and our PTA have been amazing, and they crept in under cover of darkness one night early in December and commandeered a notice board at the school, and they had collected hundreds of WhatsApp messages from parents saying thank you, and they pinned them on this board, and then staff were able to see them the next morning, and the appreciation and the gratitude from parents and carers, I think, means such a lot to the teachers, and we're now very grateful to them for confiscating mobile phones and checking in on their students remotely learning.
And the last question, what do you need from us in order to succeed?
I think it would just be great if you could talk positively about the school and try and dampen that noise about teachers moaning. We are all incredibly lucky that we have a job, and many of our families have suffered during this pandemic, and certainly at Chiswick School and all of the head teachers I talk to in Hounslow are very, very grateful to be serving their communities at this time.
Thank you. I do have a question about the school street, but I think I'll leave that to Councillor Hearn to follow up.
Yeah, Councillor Hearn, please.
Thank you, Laura, and I associate myself with all of the praise that you and your school have been getting. Thank you. I wasn't going to ask about the school street, but if you want to comment on where we are with the school street and how is it for you, and if there's anything we can do to make it better for you.
Sorry, to make what better?
The school street arrangement that's coming in on that stubby end of Staveley Road that the school has its entrance by.
Well, certainly for us, we had a nasty accident with a bus about 18 months ago. So not having the level of traffic that goes past during the end of school is very is reassuring for us. And I know that this is an issue that has divided opinion in Chiswick, and I'm staying neutral to that. But I think at the moment during lockdown there are less cars, which is great for the school.
Yeah. Just to go on the record, I think don't think anyone's going to disagree with me, but certainly the three ward councillors all support the street schools. We haven't talked to you about it because it just seems so obvious that it was a good idea. If I can move on to three other areas, I'll try and be quick, but that's not always easy. The 94% attendance rate, that's 94% of what? Is that 94% of the children that you're expecting to come in, the disadvantaged children and the ones who are children of key workers? Is that what the 94% is, or is it a measure of something else?
So the 94% was for term one, so that's between September and December, and I think nationally attendance was hovering around 80%. So it just was a way of me reassuring Chiswick that children felt safe to come back to school with us, and that was great.
But that's all the pupils, 94% of all the pupils?
Yes, that's right.
I can't say anything other than wow, I think. It's amazing. The transition between primary and secondary, as a primary governor, it's something that I take an interest in. Was that a lot more difficult this last year?
It was different because we couldn't have the it was different because we couldn't have the visits that we usually do, but we ran a live programme where children got to meet each other from different schools in Year 6, and our Director of Fun was involved in that as well, and we've had some really positive feedback from our new Year 7 students, so we're pleased with that.
So just quickly, probably something that you might carry over, lessons learned from that might go on into the future. The final area is just in that the disadvantage gap. You say 40% of your children are from disadvantaged backgrounds, and there's this fear that they'll fall behind even if they have the right equipment, even if they have internet connection and so on. Do you think you're fighting a losing battle, or do you think you're holding your ground?
I think that we are holding our ground. there has always been a disadvantage gap, and it is just going to grow wider because of the disadvantage that exists. But we're working hard in Chiswick to make sure that we are doing as much as we can to make sure that that doesn't happen for our children.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Right, thanks, Sam. Councillor Ron Machito, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Laura. That's a fantastic report, and I'd like to associate myself with my colleagues who have praised your hard work. And I'd like to add that I think over Christmas, like you mentioned at the beginning, you were given just a few days, or in fact a few hours, to prepare for the next term, and you've done really well to get that going. In terms of your work in the community, I think the name, the Chiswick name, is really resonating, because you have, for example, we've got the Stay at Home Chiswick mural on the plinth, which we put up, and that is fantastic and shows how well your pupils are doing, and obviously puts the name out there. The other thing I'd like to add on that is we run across one of your students, Stan. I think he was doing his junior citizenship course, and with one of our litter picks. And again, he was a great example of Chiswick School and how it engages with the local community. So I really want to praise Stan for that. For obvious reasons, I won't give his surname, but he was doing his citizenship course. The question that I have for you is, you talked about staff retention, and I think that this is so important, not only to keep good staff at your school, but also to help with the what Councillor Gill mentioned earlier, which is the mental health of our students, because by having a regular staff or a regular teacher from year 7 up to year 12 will actually support and help the development of our students fully. How are you going to maintain that level of staff retention going forward after COVID-19?
I think that's a very good question, and we've worked really hard to make sure that the climate at Chiswick School is really positive, so that teachers can teach free from disruption, and also we are really we really care about our moral purpose and why we're there, and actually we have a team of staff at the school now, many of whom are Oxford and Cambridge graduates themselves, who have chosen to come and work in Chiswick because they're very interested in social mobility. And we're a team, and we're a strong team. We're like a family, and like all families, you don't get on all the time, but there's a bond, and I think that we are becoming stronger and stronger despite what's happened over the last few months.
Yeah. But on that, Laura, I mean, there will be a number of staff who I'm not sure, but perhaps live a long way away. Do you see that as potentially a reason for them perhaps looking for work closer by? I mean, are we recruiting for the market in Chiswick, or are we kind of going further out to pick up the best teachers?
I've used my network quite a lot, so I've brought in teachers and leaders that I've worked with before. We've got a number of teachers that are fairly local, that are training to teach, that are excellent graduates, and I think that it's part of my job to make sure that they don't want to leave. Obviously, there is a time for people to move on, and it's right for their career, and we want to develop and shape leaders that can go on and have impact in other schools. But I think that I'm fairly content with where we are and the direction that that's heading in.
Thank you.
Councillor McGregor, please.
Good evening, and I have one comment and one question, and my comment is 2 words: absolutely stunning. Your approach obviously works, and I'm delighted to hear it. I'm a school governor, and I'm interested in the question of supply teaching. You mentioned the fact that you've had full attendance from your academic teaching staff throughout, obviously a tribute to you and your leadership team. What was the situation before the lockdown? Did you find yourself either this year or last year having to get supply teachers? And what's your benchmark? How many were you using in a normal time?
So I would say I would say that at the beginning of my tenure as head teacher, there were a number of supply teachers who were delivering the curriculum. I'm happy to say that they are not with us. Supply teachers can be fantastic, but it's not right that they are employed for a long-term position in a school, really. We employed a cover supervisor, so he's part of our team. He knows the children. If a staff member has a course or is unwell, then they can step in. And as I said, staff during this time who were having to self-isolate would deliver their lessons from home. So I'd be happy to talk to you outside of the meeting about that if that would be easier.
Chair, through you, I'd be delighted to give you a call, but I won't take up any more of your time. Thank you very much indeed.
Laura, we've come to the end of your presentation. It's a mammoth. You've done an outstanding job. Can I readily endorse the comments of members of the public and my team? The question has been tough too, and you've been a consummate professional as ever. So sincere thanks for coming tonight. Sincere thanks for all the presentation and the IT issues. We're terribly grateful to you, and thank you so much. Very pleasant. Colleagues, can we move on now, please, to agenda item 6? I'd like to introduce Kelly O'Neill, who's the Director of Public Health, London Borough of Hounslow.
Good evening, Councillor Todd and colleagues, and thank you for inviting me to speak at your area forum. I'm presenting this evening with my colleague Sam Greenheath, who is a junior officer in my team. So Moina, can you pop the presentation up, please? Thank you. Okay, we're just going to, and in typical public health fashion, we do always come with graphs, but we'll pick out the sort of the headlines for you. If you can go to the next slide for me, Moina. Thank you. So this is our starting point in terms of the pandemic progress. So this is a profile of cases for the whole of Hounslow. I think the things to pick out here is that we've had 16,000 cases. It is important just to say that the first wave between the March and May, community testing wasn't available. So all of those tests that are highlighted as part of that small curve there are hospital admissions. Community testing, which you'll have seen through PCR route and more laterally through lateral flow that Laura referred to, was introduced much later, and this is the number of cases on a daily basis that have tested positive in the borough. Now, the important thing just to sort of flag is that at the bottom is lockdown 2, that period of time. In the borough, we did not see a significant impact of lockdown 2, and therefore we came out of a increase in cases to a very small period of time where we saw a small decrease. And I put some sort of reference points in terms of rates of infection on this particular graph, and just over the last month. So if you look back on the 12th of December, the rate of infection for Hounslow was 171 per 100,000 people in the borough, and this kind of massive escalation that we've seen to today, which is our reported cases, is 1,141 per 100,000. This is a picture and a pattern that is similar across all of London. In the first wave, Northwest London had quite a significant impact in terms of high numbers compared to the rest of London. But this particular wave, as you'd have seen from the media, it's more significantly affected Essex and the London boroughs Essex, Kent, and the London boroughs that border those counties. Moina, if you can go to the next one, please. So this is a picture of the borough. And this is the total number of cases that we've seen over the course of pandemic, and just be reminded that these are based on the number of reported cases that test positive. Now, the darker the colour, the higher the number of cases, and what you'll see is the central part of the borough has been significantly affected, with case numbers that are double the least affected. Chiswick has been the least affected in terms of numbers. In terms of the age profile, particularly on this important second wave, which has coincided with winter pressures, the majority of cases that we have seen have been in the working age population, and this is really important because these are the people that are less likely to be hospitalised. And if you remember back to the initial part of the pandemic, the message was stay at home, save lives, protect the NHS. At this point in time, the system is quite pressured, and it is from a combination of winter pressures and this quite significant escalation in the number of cases that we've seen, contributed to by this new strain variation that was first identified in Essex. So Sam, if I can just pass over to you. Moina, next slide, please.
Thank you, Kelly. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at the Chiswick Area Forum. So yeah, I'm just going to sort of reiterate what Kelly's mentioned and sort of show you the current situation within Hounslow regarding COVID-19 and sort of focus on the changes over the past few weeks and that impact demonstrated in a number of methods. So the graph you can see here is another form of displaying the recent impact that we've had. This is showing the infection rate, the rate it's changed, as opposed to looking at the daily number of cases. So as you can clearly see, since December time, the rate has rapidly increased with that gradient. And if we look at the parameters within those infection rates, with the most recent granular information from the 31st of December to the 6th of January, so the 7-day infection rate was 1,096 per 100,000. Which equates to about 1.1, just under 1.1% of our population in the last 7 days. So that number then comes back to a total of 2,977 cases in the last 7 days. Again, reiterating what Kelly's mentioned, the bulk of those cases we have seen have been within the working age population. And again, because the risk is exacerbated within the population of over 60s, that's what we closely monitor. And so within this 7-day period, 14% of all cases had been over the age of 60. If we look at the case positivity, which is the proportion of tests completed which come back positive, we're looking at 24.7% in this time frame, which is considerably higher than where we were sort of pre-lockdown to pre-December. And if you tie that in terms of our picture in London and then across England, in London we were the 8th highest, and in England we were 21st. Yes. Moina, can you go on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is just from a geographical perspective displaying the highest burden of cases in the last 7 days. And again, we're sort of focusing on that central Midwestern area of the borough, with Hounslow Central, Heston West, Hounslow West being the more dominant, as well as Cranford and Heston East. And again, even with the 7-day picture, Chiswick has been seeing the lowest number of cases. I just want to draw your attention to the map at the bottom. So this is a hotspot map. So this is where we've tabulated the postcodes that we've seen most frequently as been flagged as recording a case. And so this enables us to target particular areas within each ward just to see where cases are highest, and we can focus whether it's communications in that particular area, enforcement, etc. So this is just a more granular level of providing where we're seeing the highest number of cases. Moina, can you go on to the next slide, please? So this is just focusing on Chiswick specifically and the numbers that we've seen in Chiswick. So up to the 6th of January, we'd seen in the wards of Chiswick Homefields, Chiswick Riverside and Turnham Green, we'd seen 1,314 cases. If we look at that from December to the 6th of Jan, 810 of those 1,314 cases were within that time frame, which counts to about 62% of total cases being from December onwards. So that sort of just demonstrates another way of that increase in cases in the last month or so. So Chiswick Homefields is now on the 6th of January had recorded 483 cases, That's the third lowest number of cases in the borough, which comes to about 3.2% of the total cases. Chiswick Riverside, which is the lowest, has documented 401 cases, and Turnham Green has documented 430. But again, we're seeing a sort of consistent 60 to 70% increase in cases in the wards, even though these are the lowest number of cases recorded. Moina, can you go on to the next slide, please? So that, with focusing on Chiswick still, putting it in comparison with the rest of the borough, what you can document here is that the increase has been visible in our highest performing and lowest performing wards. But I would just want to highlight the difference and the impact in the areas where we're seeing the highest number of cases, that being Hounslow Central, Heston West and Cranford. There's clear daylight between the two the areas, but still it's key to not be complacent and see that the impact is still being felt within Chiswick. Can you go to the next slide, please, Moina? Thank you. So this is a 7-day total cases seen between timeframes from September to the 6th of January. And so this is just a rolling graph where we can see and document where we're seeing these increases, where cases will be falling off. And as you can see, again, there's clear daylight between areas where we're seeing highest and areas within Chiswick. Chiswick Homefields is the only ward in the Chiswick area which has gone over 100 cases reported in a 7-day period. But it must be stated that Chiswick Homefields is a host to a number of vulnerable settings which have contributed to the number being slightly higher in this area. But the key thing to document again would be the slight increase in all wards, but again the difference between the regions where we're seeing the highest impact and the lowest. Moina, can you go on to the next slide, please? So just looking at the demographics, the picture in Chiswick specifically is pretty much similar to what we've seen in the rest of Hounslow. In terms of gender, we've seen slightly more women test positive. The age profile, again, we're focused more predominantly in that 20 to 59 age range, which is the working age population. 16% of cases have been over the age of 60 within the 3 Chiswick wards. But again, if you account in the number of how fewer number of cases there have been in Chiswick, it's not too dissimilar to the rest of the borough. The ethnicity is interesting because of the dynamic of the population cohort within Chiswick. That the highest number of cases with an ethnic background documented is British and any other white background. But I've included the no ethnicity information because we are purely at the mercy of those that have gone to get a test inputting their information, and a lot of them do not. So again, it does prove that we do rely on the residents to provide this information, but it can be distorted if they haven't included it. Can you go to the next slide, please, Moina? So I'll quickly explain this. It's a bit of a mad looking map, but essentially each of these circles here is a postcode where we have seen a case since the 1st of September. And the greater the size of the circle, the more cases have been in that postcode. And the reason why I've displayed this this map is just to display that within Chiswick, we're still seeing cases focus across the 3 wards. It's not particularly within one area. And it's also showing that we are seeing, the proportion of cases within postcodes. We are seeing multiple cases within each of the postcodes, which could be indicative of community spread and possibly to do with this new strain, which Kelly mentioned before. And can you go to the next slide, please, Moina? Thank you. And then just a final description on maps and displaying the COVID-19 data from me is on the left, there's a hotspot map which documents where we're seeing cases of close proximity within Hounslow, which is it's just another format of displaying the proportional symbol map from the slide before. But in terms of what we know about the layout and the residential layout of Chiswick, so on the map on the right, this is displaying the residential areas of Chiswick. The housing estates are in brown, the residential areas and addresses are in blue. And from the analysis that I've done with some of the spatial intelligence team at the London Borough Hounslow, it's still indicative that the majority of cases we are seeing is focused predominantly in the residential areas, but we are still seeing isolated cases throughout the borough, but it's clear that it's not focused in just one particular area, it's still spread across the entirety. I think that's all from me, Kelly, so back to you. Oh, Kelly, you're on mute.
Sorry, complete novice here. so this is what's going on in the borough, but obviously the response to this is incredibly important. This is a really, really challenging time. This massive escalation of cases was something that we didn't anticipate. What we did anticipate and what we knew from the Medical Academy Sciences report that was published around about July is that the second wave was likely to coincide with winter pressures within the NHS. Now, the primary objective of all of this is to protect lives. That is fundamentally our number one priority in all of this. So in many respects, while we can keep, well, if infection rate is going to increase, if we can keep it in the healthier population, that limits the impact on the NHS. And common sense will tell you that the likelihood of death increases for those people who are hospitalised, and particularly those people who require intensive care and ventilator support. So all of this work that we currently do, we monitor. Incredible amount of surveillance of data is going on. We look for clusters, we look for outbreaks, and all of this contributes to a disease picture. So it's a combination of trying to triangulate information from a number of sources. Now, as the pandemic has gone on, we've been able to use different data, much more accurate data, and obviously all the data that you currently see is shared nationally in terms of on public websites now. What we tend to see is we probably have a bit of a head start, so we see it probably about 2 or 3 days in advance, sometimes a little bit less. So we monitor it, and as Sam said, we identify where the problems are and we respond. And primary aim is this is about protecting the population. Now, obviously, there are parts of the population that are incredibly more vulnerable than others, so they are our number one priority. So care homes. Care homes have our most vulnerable people in our community. They saw quite a significant hit in the first wave in terms of the number of cases and the number of deaths. Now, we were lucky in Hounslow because we, as a council, we invested more than £1 million in PPE when it wasn't available to protect our staff who work in care homes and protect the wider care home community. So it didn't necessarily matter whether we as an organisation commissioned it. We provided it and we prolifically sent it out. And the reason for that is that we need our care staff out there protecting our most vulnerable, but equally, if you don't provide PPE, the transmission between carers and residents mean we put those residents' health at risk. So we've done a lot of work in terms of managing outbreaks. Now, as I say, in the first round of first wave, our number of deaths in care homes was minimal. The number of outbreaks was small. They didn't tend to be a significant number. Remember, testing wasn't really routinely available at that time, so it was a sort of combination of looking for symptoms. What we are seeing now is quite a rapid increase in the number of care homes where there are outbreaks of infection, and because of this incredible transmissibility of the infection, by the time we've identified cases of infection amongst staff who are tested every week and among residents who are tested every month, by the time we've got those results back, we know that it's likely to have spread. So there's a lot of work that's being invested by public health and through our joint commissioning team at the council who work with these providers to support them and get on top of that. And much of this work requires, sort of quite intense incident management support, on-site visits, because we have to be able to see what's going on, to monitor the impact, but also to ensure that infection control and prevention standards are being maintained. So that's a lot of work at the moment, but this is really important. They are our most vulnerable residents, and obviously the vaccination programme has rolled out. So we're trying to sort of balance this issue of managing these outbreaks at the same time as rolling out the vaccination, and trying to balance the level of risk in terms of our staff being able to go into those care homes in order to vaccinate those people who aren't currently COVID positive. So as I say, it is in a very intense period, and I have to say, if only the vaccination had been available 4 weeks ago, it feels as if we wouldn't be quite at such this sort of difficult point within the pandemic. As Laura has kindly said, we've done a lot of work with schools. I have to say that our schools have done a fantastic job in protecting our young people in the borough. They are very COVID secure environments. There are very few clusters or very few cases where I've seen actual community or transmission within schools. The odd few, but actually remember that infection tends to come in from the community, and so therefore it is, schools aren't hermetically sealed environments. Children come in to schools, staff come into schools, and before you know it, they've identified as positive, and the impact of that has been quite significant in terms of the number of children that have had to go home as identified contacts. There have been outbreaks at the hospital. There's been outbreaks at the Youth Offending institution, and businesses and workplaces, houses of multiple occupancy, and our sports clubs. What I'm trying to demonstrate in that list is all of the environments where people congregate or people are not immune, for want of a better word, to the impact of this virus. So what we have in place is the National Test and Trace Track and Trace programme. What happens there is these positive cases are identified, and then they are entered onto the tracing programme, and they are followed up. So what we provide in the borough is what's called enhanced contact tracing. So quite a significant number of people for some reason aren't contactable by the tracing programme, and their details are sent to us for us to follow up. We follow up by telephone, and we follow up by knocking on their doors if we can't find them. And the main aim of that is, one, to identify that they are there, two, that they are isolating, and three, what support we can offer them if required in order to facilitate that isolation. And that is really key, and because essentially a lot of people have struggled with the financial implications, and what we don't want is that to constrain people from isolating and doing the right thing. A lot of communication and engagement support has gone into trying to address this. It's been very intense. We've been led nationally by the direct communications that have come out from the government. They've reinforced the messages. There has been no excuse for people not knowing what those public information messages are. People hear them, but not everybody responds to them and acts in a way that is a good citizen within our borough. We've had good partnerships with leaders within the community. I think, as Laura has alluded to, we've done a lot of work supporting our schools, because actually, while we're protecting the vulnerable people within our community, as a mother of a Year 11 child, although he'd hate for me to mention that he was a child, a Year 11 young person, I want my children back. I want my children in school, and pretty much most other parents want them in school. So supporting schools has been really, really key. Working with our faith communities have voluntarily closed many of the places of worship in order to help us bring down this rate of infection. And obviously working with our health and social care colleagues has been absolutely essential, especially at this time when we need that throughput of system management to be able to get people into hospital and out the other end back into the community. And as Laura also mentioned, we are also not we also don't hear about the changes to government guidelines and government legislation and policy direction. We find it out from the Prime Minister's 5 o'clock conference. So often we're having to develop an iterative response with regard to that. Next slide, please, Moina. So as I said, priority number one is managing really severe illness. And just to remind people that whenever we get people who have been in contact or where infection has been transmitted, the time frame between a point at which somebody is exposed to a virus to the point at which they are likely to get to access hospital should they need it is between 11 and 18 days. So as it's the 12th of January today, we will still be seeing the impact of whatever was going on over Christmas and New Year, particularly New Year, up until probably the 18th of January. So, watching and waiting and keeping a sort of a mindful brief of cases is going to be really important over the next few days, which obviously is why the government are really keen to understand, what the nature of the NHS and the risk of the NHS is. So I showed that graph earlier on that just demonstrates that the rate of infection has increased significantly in the last month. The hospital activity, sustained pressure and surge in cases, and as you'll have heard in the media, West Middlesex is exactly the same. The activity is way above what we were seeing in wave 1. The current inpatient numbers in the hospital is well over 200 COVID positive patients and roughly about 26 people in intensive care, and pretty much all but 2 wards are COVID wards. So what you also got to remember is actually during winter pressures we would normally see hospitals full for other reasons. So obviously there is going to be a non-COVID impact to all of this as well. And the major drive is to provide care in the community where we possibly can, and only deal with the most acute patients in hospital. So there's a real drive to support our community services in order to help facilitate that safe discharge back into the community. Next slide, please, Moina. Clearly, from a public health perspective, we have to reduce this rate of infection. So lockdown 3 has come at a time when it was much needed. It would have been great if it had been before, ideally before Christmas, but at least the rules were semi-modified before people started properly socialising with each other over Christmas. So clear communications are really key. I've mentioned about the communications that we currently have. It is important just to say that we have not sustained this kind of constant direct communication, because otherwise we've recognized that people have communication fatigue. We need them to respond at the time we need them to respond. So managing communications through our communications team and through the NHS communications team has been absolutely key. We've got testing, so enforcement teams are on the ground. Just to remind people that, and I think Vicky Wallace from the council would be unhappy if I wasn't to say this, is that the police are responsible for enforcing individuals in the community. The council enforcement teams are responsible for enforcing rules within businesses. So the other things that we're doing, testing, we've had PCR, which is the drive-through and walk-through testing, available to us for many months now. We've got a site at Feltham, Hounslow Central, Heston and Heathrow, and Stamford Brook is going to be assessed on Friday for it to go live next week. Care home testing I've already alluded to. And then Laura sort of demonstrated what can be achieved rapidly with lateral flow. So we've got many of our schools doing lateral flow. All of our secondary schools have this in place. This is an ability for us to be on the front foot in schools rather than constantly responding to cases. It's about tracking and tracing and identifying, and this is moving forward. It's another tool in our toolbox. It's not perfect, but it's better than not having it. We've got a public health. We've got a mass testing program that started Monday last week. Monday the 5th or Monday the 4th? Every day seems to merge into each other now. At Heston Library and Hounslow House. This is asymptomatic testing, a bit like they were doing in Liverpool, that will allow us to identify people who do not display any symptoms but are infectious. The government guidelines as of today is to drive that towards key workers, because they're the ones that are out and about. So we've roughly done about 1,200 so far. We are opening 2 more sites next week, and we're starting to do mobile testing as well to go to businesses. Next slide, please, Moina. And obviously, the get out of jail card here is the vaccination program, and this has to be our #1 priority, because this is the means by which we're going to be able to start thinking about getting back to normal. So it's an NHS-led program. There are 2 vaccines that are available at the moment. One is logistically a little bit problematic. As you will have seen, there is a change in the dosage. So it changes in the regime for the vaccination, and that's really, really important, because that is based on a public health decision. So it's a clinical public health decision that will provide protection for the population at speed. It's not going to provide population protection at 100%, but this is the means by which, when you have a reduced supply of vaccine, you can vaccinate as many people as you possibly can to a level that they are less likely to have to get serious infection and to get hospitalized. So, you know, the vaccination program change has been based on how do you reduce deaths. And obviously, as I've said all the way through, that is the ambition here, is that to reduce deaths to as few as possible. And this kind of change is a means by which we will be able to facilitate that. So the vaccination sites, there are 3 vaccination sites up and running. There are 2 types of vaccination sites. One is this GP-led vaccination program that's going to target the most vulnerable people, which are the older residents that we have. The second one is a mass vaccination site, and that will be opened up once the more vulnerable residents are vaccinated. They are our priority. We've got one PCN, which is a GP network site at the heart of Hounslow. You've had lots of vaccines at Chiswick so far. So last week, I have to applaud my colleagues at Chiswick Health Centre. They got an extra batch of vaccines, and in 3 days vaccinated roughly about 2,500 people. That is incredible. And the third site came on live and goes on live this week. It's at Thornbury. And then next week, that we hope that Feltham will go live. There are a few logistical issues that we may need to iron out, but it's at the discretion of the NHS. And the mass vaccination site will be at Brentford. There are 10 of those mass vaccination sites in northwest London. We expect that to go live around about early mid-February, once the supply is properly sorted out. I think the next slide, Moina, I think. Yeah, so I've mentioned about the change in vaccination schedule, but the important point at the last minute, just to really reiterate, is that if you give 100 people 1 dose, they're nearly fully protected. In comparison to if we were to complete 2 doses for everybody, we'd have 50 people fully protected with 2 doses and 50 people with no protection. So on a population protection level, this is a good action to take. It's not politically driven. Next slide, please. Okay, that's just to recognise that the priority groups are by age. So the real focus is the over 80s and people in care homes, then it's the over 70s. But at the same time, we absolutely need to make sure that we get really good high uptake amongst NHS staff and social care staff and key workers, particularly those 2 former groups, because they need to be the ones that we need to have in place in order to look after the rest of us, because cases will go up. Unfortunately, hospitalizations will increase, and there will be a significant number of deaths, particularly this month and also in Hounslow. So just as a proxy measure, we are the number of deaths increased in the borough in December, and we've already passed that by the 12th of January. I think that's enough. Monica, can you just check? Thank you. I've gone through that quite quickly. I hope you don't mind. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Kelly, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for Sam too. We have some public questions. I'll ask my colleague to read them out if you don't mind.
Okay, Chair. The first question is actually a couple of questions, but it's about the distribution of COVID-19 across the borough. So the first one is, do you have a theory as to why Chiswick got off relatively lightly versus the rest of the borough? And then related to that is a question from Marina Sharma, who has asked, why do you feel that Hounslow Central, Heston, Hounslow West and Cranford have had higher infection rates?
I think they are probably part of the same answer. The reason why I think that Heston and Central Hounslow is because of the demographics of the population. It's a combination of age deprivation and exposure. So people who work in service industries, and you'll have seen the Public Health England report that was published back in July that looked at who those people were that were hospitalised, who were the people that had died, and it particularly was in relation to BAME communities, who were the community groups that were most likely to die, and that contributed to that was the fact that those are the minority groups that are more likely to have the high exposure jobs. So they are more likely to be carers, they're more likely to be taxi drivers, security guards. So there is an issue about exposure and employment. So that's I suppose our main theory. The other indication that we've seen is that the biggest source of transmission up until this variant strain, but certainly pretty much most of the way through, has been household transmission. So people who have multiple family members, intergenerational families, living in the same household and living in a confined space. Once you see one case one day, in the next subsequent days you'll see 2, 3, 4 or more cases, and most of these kind of similar postcode areas are a combination of yes, dense community living, but pretty much most are household contacts.
Okay, I have another question. This one, anonymous question. Re-COVID cases in Hounslow. How do the numbers correlate with the location of the airport?
Well, that's a really good question. My personal view, and I have no evidence to back that up, is, and I think somebody pointed out today, when we put in our bid for being a borough of culture, and I that kind of was pre my time in Hounslow. One of the things that we heralded was how well connected the borough is, and that's excellent if you're a borough of culture. But for a virus which is highly transmissible, that's not a particular good position to be in. So essentially, I think that the proximity to the airport has probably contributed to this, and certainly Hillingdon had a similar issue. I think that there was a lot of exposure initially. Obviously, the airport is not running at the same level as it currently was. I think we missed a trick nationally for airport entry. Now we have health surveillance for airport entry, but I don't think we did it robustly enough nationally, and we're still in a position where sort of screening of people arriving in the country is still not as effective as it needs to be if there is onward travel.
Okay, we have another anonymous question. Why do you only have 3 vaccination sites operational? When can you get the pharmacists to do the vaccinations?
Yeah, so this is I don't want to bat it onto the responsibility of the NHS England. What they have done, the NHS, is rolled out the vaccination programme in a phased way because of the logistics of trying to get it to everywhere in a similar way. So the process by which these sites have been authorised is that they have to meet a certain criteria, and what the NHS decided to do was make these GP networks called primary care networks responsible for rolling out the vaccination in a coordinated way. And within that, each of these primary care networks, which are groups of GP surgeries, were required to organise themselves, identify a location, and then to identify the workforce through which it was going to deliver this vaccination programme. If you can imagine that we don't actually have a huge number of people that are spare to be able to do this in the way that we would want to do it, especially at a time when the NHS is having difficulties in terms of winter, in terms of a response to the number of COVID patients that are in hospital and within the community. At the moment, it feels like it has been a little bit of a perfect storm. So the kind of, if you align the cheese holes, things are falling through the gaps. Pharmacists will all be coming online, and there is certainly a plan in the borough to increase capacity and to support that. Pharmacists are working within the primary care networks to help with the vaccination rollout, but at the same time, just to remind you that they aren't just being delivered from these primary care network sites, they're also being delivered within the communities, within care homes, and that takes quite a significant amount of resources to do it safely. But we are constrained, and I will be really honest about that. There is not enough vaccine available in order to roll this out at the pace it needs to roll out.
Okay, thanks.
I would hasten to add that won't be the case in a few weeks' time.
Okay, I have a question from Marie Rabuhans. Are you still giving the Pfizer vaccine? And if so, how will you ensure this vaccine is available for the second dose after 12 weeks?
So two things there. Is that yes, we are giving the Pfizer vaccination because that was the initial one that came into the program. I would say that 25% of the people in this country that have had the vaccination have received their second dose. So there is certainly a group of people that have been fully vaccinated. The view clinically is that these vaccinations can be interchangeable. But there is still a constant supply of Pfizer vaccination. So where it is, where we can, we will continue to vaccinate people who've had the first dose with Pfizer with a second dose of Pfizer. It doesn't appear to be an issue with the amount of vaccination that's going to be coming in the future. I think this is just an issue of supply initially.
Thank you. Chair, just to let you know, we have 3 more questions from the public, if that's okay. The next.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question, and this is quite a specific one about Chiswick. You've said that 16% of cases in Chiswick are over 60. What is? I'm not sure this makes sense. Let me read it to you anyway. You said that 16% of cases in Chiswick are over 60. What is the percentage of over 60s in Chiswick in general? On the Hounslow demographic, it appears to be around 25%.
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, I'm afraid. Sam, do you know? I mean, I can certainly find it out.
Yeah, I mean,
but it is a really good question because it does sort of indicate the rates.
It's between 18 and 20%, Kelly.
Yeah. Well, I'll go with that, Councillor Todd. I will check that so that when the notes come out, we would just make sure that that is the case. I'm less concerned about, I have to say, I'm less concerned about the percentage, but the absolute numbers, because obviously, I don't know, Sam, I think you might have said that the over 60s have accounted for something between 12 and 15%, but obviously that has increased the whole time, and as these numbers have got to sort of 3,000 cases in 7 days, the absolute numbers of people have increased dramatically, which has contributed to the number of admissions. It is fair to say that if you're over 60, particularly if you're over 80, the chance of hospital admission increases dramatically.
Okay, I have a couple more questions. To what extent are deaths in the borough above historic norms?
In the first wave, so the Office of National Statistics are the organisation that deals with that. In the first wave, compared to all of the other London boroughs, our excess deaths, which is the deaths over and above which you would normally see over the average of the last few years, which is how we calculate that. Hounslow had the lowest number of excess deaths across all the boroughs in London, well, apart from the City of London, but we don't tend to count that in terms of public health terms. I can't tell you at this moment in time what that's likely to look like in the second round because of this lag. Sam, is there because you are a data king, is there anything recently that we have that would indicate that, or is it? It's this 3-month lag that's always the problem.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That.
Well, the pattern of deaths for Hounslow is not dissimilar to other areas, but in terms of what it is over and above our excess for this time of year, I couldn't tell you that. What I can tell you, though, is that when I see the registrar data that's reported to me daily, and on death certification, people have to say that they have been COVID positive, and there's kind of the change in the way that we've defined a COVID death to having been infected or been infected within the last 28 days. It is certainly much greater. The numbers of people who have died with that 28-day of having been tested positive with COVID accounts for pretty much 50–60% of the deaths that are recorded on a daily basis at the moment.
Thanks, Kelly. I have another question which is specific to this area of the borough. Why is there no testing facility at Chiswick Health Centre, which is a central facility for thousands of people, as proved by its being used as a vaccination centre?
Well, two things there is that the Department of Health and Social Care have to validate locations for testing centres and for mobile testing centres, and we have tried on a number of occasions to get a testing site within the borough. We did have a site on the B&Q car park that was identified, but unfortunately about 2 weeks ago that was also withdrawn, and there's been a number of locations that we've tried to have a testing site, which have, we've gone through the stages of planning for it, and then at the last minute it's been withdrawn. So this new testing site, which gets reviewed on the 15th, which is Friday, is at Stamford Brook Car Park. There is a lot of work that's gone in to try and get that established. The other thing that we are doing is to set up a lateral flow testing centre within Chiswick. That's much easier because we're in control of that. But at the moment, because our lateral flow is about population surveillance and we are building up that capacity, we've really had to focus on the centre of the borough because that's where the massive community transmission is. But we will put a lateral flow testing site within the borough. Now, in terms of Chiswick Health Centre, we're not allowed to use NHS locations for testing, for PCR testing, because it is focused on people with symptoms. You can't send people with symptoms to an NHS site because actually you're mixing well people or people who are unwell with or well people with people who have got the symptoms of COVID, and that would be disastrous. In terms of the vaccination centre, they are purposely put on NHS sites, and even when they're not put on NHS, we're not allowed to actually put a testing site, even if it's an asymptomatic testing site, with a vaccination site. That's not allowed. So it's a kind of a number of issues that have contributed to all of this. It's not through want of trying, I can assure you.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. Surely,
John, can we make these the last two, I think?
Absolutely, Chair. Okay, surely one-off lateral flow testing for the population is of minimal value, and if it is being used, it needs repeating regularly, as I do in my work.
Yes. So sorry, what did you say about minimal value? The lateral flow test is a minimal value if it's not done repeatedly. Is that, sorry, is that? Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It is a useful tool to tell you on the here and now that somebody is positive, but you also need a reference point. So actually identifying a case on the first time round at the first attempt at screening may tell you that somebody has been positive in the last short time previously. It may not tell you that someone's infectious. But what we are pushing and we're trying to reinforce is that people, particularly key workers, do this routinely. So once or twice a week, once at the very least, twice would be fantastic, but to keep coming back and be retested, because actually, as I say, it will only tell you that someone's got COVID on the here and now. One of the changes that is going to happen, though, is at the moment it requires a confirmatory PCR test. The guidelines will be changing soon because actually the test is very, very accurate with testing people who are true positives. So that confirmatory PCR is probably likely to be withdrawn in the next couple of weeks.
And the last question, are you able to tell us why there is a reduced supply
of vaccine?
I guess so, yes.
I assume so. Well, it's a new vaccine. The government have procured a huge amount of vaccine, but it takes a little while to procure. I think the only thing I can tell you is what is reported in the media. Certainly, the Pfizer vaccine, that wasn't a vaccine that was procured in massive bulk initially. So I would imagine there's quite a lot of competition from around the world for that particular vaccine. It's a very, very good vaccine, and everybody will want to be on board with that. So it takes some time to manufacture. In terms of media, in the Oxford one, there's the issue about vials. Again, it's the position of we've managed to get a vaccination very, very quickly. It's gone through all of the trials. These are really, really good vaccines. Now we have to produce them at the scale required in order to vaccinate everybody at least once as soon as possible. And that's the ambition. As many people in the shortest space of time safely.
Okay, that wraps up the questions from the public, Chair.
Thank you. Kelly, my colleagues are very keen to ask you some questions, and I know members of the public have also emailed them too. We're due to finish at 9:30. If I can get the committee's permission, would you mind extending it, say, for half an hour?
I can. It's my birthday today, so I was hoping. But no, you carry on.
Too.
It's not as if I haven't had many, let's be honest.
Okay, well, we'll ask you to be brief and punchy. Okay. Can I ask one of my colleagues to nominate that we extend for half an hour, please?
Yes, I will nominate, Chair.
And I'll second. I'm happy to second. Sorry, Kelly.
No worries.
Thanks very much.
No
Bear in mind. Okay.
And can we wish Kelly a happy birthday all together? Happy birthday, Kelly.
Happy birthday, Kelly.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Can I ask Ranjit any questions, please?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. First of all, Kelly, thank you ever so much for the presentation. I mean, it's always wonderful to listen to you, as you've done many presentations. And I will agree with Laura, you're just an amazing person. Your dedication, your energy, and the support you provide to anyone is just simply beyond the call of your duty. And I know I've contacted you at odd hours and you have been just so wonderful. So I thank you, and I'm sure you're doing such a brilliant job. My question to you is on the Pfizer vaccines. Now, there's a limited date once it's available. So what happens if somebody doesn't turn up or people don't turn up? Does those vaccines, do they get thrown away? Or because I know no, I know. But do you have people lined up to take those?
Yes. So what tends to happen is that we tend to use those on the essential health and social care staff. So what we do have, because we never know when the vaccines are going to arrive, we fill the vaccination clinics. If people then don't turn up for whatever reason, they will be re-invited, and we do follow up where they are. But we cannot waste any of this vaccination. So what we tend to have is a list of staff. Health and social care staff who are rung up, and I have to say I volunteered at the first vaccination centre. We were still working at 9:30 on a Friday evening in order to make sure that the last 2 doses were administered, because they do have short expiry dates once they are thawed. None of it's wasted. None of it.
Thank you for that. Now there is a rumour going around that ventilators are not provided to every patient. There's something like an age cutoff. I mean, is that true or no?
No. So health. It is fair to say that at times there then does need to be clinical judgment about who benefits from sort of certain care for very acute patients. Nobody is not given the care that they need. It's a very different. I have to say that moving forward, if the cases do continue to arise, to increase, and there is some bed capacity, but it really is very sparse, and this is why I'm very, very keen to ensure that those messages are heard. Clinicians are going to have to make some very draconian decisions. That it's going to be a very, very difficult time, and we haven't got there yet, but I'm anticipating that if the rate of infection doesn't decrease and the level of hospitalizations, I'm afraid that may well become a reality.
Right, okay. Well, thank you very much. I'll let my colleagues have more questions for you.
Councillor Patrick Barr, do you have a question, please?
Councillor Todd, thank you very much. Kelly, a very big happy birthday to you. Thank you so much for your Fantastic presentation, and thank you for all you do for the community. As a nurse myself, I know the pressures faced on the NHS. Could you just tell me, or do you know, what, if any, contingency measures are in place to support West Middlesex Hospital should it become sort of like at full capacity or above?
Yeah, there's so hospitals don't work in isolation of each other. There is a Northwest London network of hospitals, and they meet at 8 o'clock every morning to look at where the pressure is, where the beds are, and they start moving where required. They start sharing sort of bed capacity and the care of these very complex patients. There is obviously the contingency of the Nightingale Hospital, and that is ready to be mobilised. And there has been a discussion about moving patients to sort of wider than London, but I haven't heard very much about where that's progressing. But at the moment, as I say, there is a really very clear oversight of where bed capacity currently is. It is going to be a very difficult time because obviously London is not alone. Other areas of the country, infection moves around. It doesn't abide by borders. So yeah, that's as far as I know, I'm afraid.
So, thank you so much, Kelly. So aside from the Nightingale Hospital, obviously for people in intensive care and very sort of critically ill COVID patients, so for general sort of day-to-day people that walk in through A&E and get admitted for non-COVID cases, they are looking at other measures, just to clarify.
Yeah, so there is lots of measures that are being looked at and worked up. So obviously the other part is that is management in the community. And so just ensuring that the hospitals are used for the most acute people is going to be really, really key. I mean, a lot of contingency work has been done, certainly in this borough, in terms of managing for this for the demanding cases. So, people are meeting regularly, people are working out how to make the best use of the resource, making sure that we can safely discharge people as early as possible. So none of these delayed discharges are going on, ensuring that our social care and our care homes and our wider care community is mobilised to help support these residents, so that we don't have people in hospital that are, for want of a better phrase, medically optimised and could be out in the community.
Kelly, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Joanna Biddulph.
Thank you, John. Yes, thank you very much, Kelly, and happy birthday as well.
Thank you.
I've just got a question from a resident who's written to all of us, but actually he's in Turnham Green Ward. And then just one very quick one on testing. He starts by saying it would boost morale and calm nerves if we were regularly updated on vaccination progress. He then talks about what's happened in Barnes and criticised what was happening here. I've corrected him on the points that weren't quite right. He says we need to see a queue in front of us diminishing on Hounslow website, or government websites, or local sources of information, or even regular updates from our councillors. We write a blog each week for chiswickw4.com. We could have a little update every week if that would help. It's more work potentially, but if you had something that was Chiswick specific, a couple of those charts to take, for example, maybe a press release that goes every week to everything in the borough. We've got several here, and there are, obviously the Hounslow Chronicle is widely read throughout the borough, but separately here. And it would help us also to counter the criticisms and the very bad, wrong information that circulates on some social media platforms, and circulates again when it's old news. It's what happened on day one, and it's being told as if it's now when day one has been sorted. So that's one question. The other one was, I've seen quite a lot of people posting on social media saying that they've gone to have lateral flow tests in other boroughs and nobody's checking postcodes. Is that an acceptable thing? Is it formal? Is it informal? Is it just potluck? Just if you could answer that, that would be great.
Okay, so in terms of the accumulator for the vaccine, actually, Niall Bolger, the chief executive of the council, said the very same I think on Friday. So Ben and the comms team are doing just that. So what we have as part of the new vaccination or revised vaccination plan is going to our senior leadership team tomorrow. Part of that communications is an aggregated, this is the percentage of our over 80s within our borough. This is the percentage that have been vaccinated, and your resident is quite right. That would show some real progress so that people would understand at a local level what that vaccination uptake is. And I absolutely agree with you on that one. In terms of lateral flow, we're part of a national programme, so of where those lateral flows are rolled out. So people can actually access a lateral flow wherever they want in the same way as a PCR. But that information on postcode is actually collected as part of the booking process. So we do know that, and we've mapped some of the information about where these early lateral flow activity has come from, and I would say probably about 95% have been people who live in the borough. There are a few people that have been outside of the borough, but actually we think they're key workers who work inside Hounslow. So it doesn't matter for me whether they live in the borough or they live elsewhere. If they're a key worker in our community, I want them tested.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much. That's it from me. Thank you. Oops, John's lost connection.
Yeah, I think it's Michael Dennis next.
Yes, I think it might be. I might just go ahead. Apologies, Chair.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But, no, I do apologise if this question has been asked before, or if you mentioned it in your excellent presentation. But I just wanted to ask: do you have enough support from central government in your work here, generally?
I think it could be improved, but equally, I think that it's long outdated to actually transfer much of the activity into local areas. I think I was frustrated by the centralisation of everything from the outset. I think I've had 17 years of working in public health. I'm very good at health protection, and I have to say it did feel at certain times during the first wave that I was sitting there sort of twiddling my thumbs thinking, so what's the role of a director of public health in a local authority? Because we are incredibly experienced people, we are incredibly capable people, and I think having sat on many of the London DPH calls, it was incredibly frustrating to see things that we had to respond to, or and I would hasten to add, to pick up the pieces when it didn't work. But actually, I think the balance is starting to move. I'd like to know in advance, before the public know in advance, that things were going to change, so I could prepare for it, rather than wait for the 5 o'clock announcement and then thinking, oh, that's a 180-degree turn on where we were going. But that's okay. We can respond to that. But yeah, it's moving in a better direction. I have to say that yeah. It could be better, but then everything could be better. If everything was perfect, we wouldn't have the number of deaths that we currently have.
No. Thank you.
That's helpful. That was all I was going to ask. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Next is Gabriella Giles, please. Gabriella, you're on mute. You're on mute.
I double clicked. That was my problem. Too hasty. Kelly, thank you so much. Happy birthday. I think, as many of us all know, we've spent many of our birthdays in council meetings or attending sessions like today. I think it's part of what just goes with the job, I've been told. The lateral flow testing. My parents went up yesterday to go and get tested. They had a fantastic experience. They said it was flawless. And I would just like to pass that on to you directly in this forum. Should we all be encouraging people to go and get that testing and indeed get ourselves tested?
Yes. Yes, on all round. I mean, I have to say that I can't really take credit for the lateral. My team have done it all without me having to really engage in that, and they've done it in the space of a week. And we will double our capacity by the end of next week, and they'll do that 7 days a week moving forward. So all the credit to them, I'm afraid. But yes, the more people that we can get tested, the better. The more we can understand what the level of infection within our community is. And importantly, the more people who are truly positive we can get into isolation, because clearly, as you've seen from various media reports, 1 in 3 people are asymptomatic, and they still will be infectious and spreading it around. So yeah, it would benefit us all.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Kelly and Gabriella. Next, I have Councillor Sam Hearn, please.
Thank you very much, Ranjit. My only question, Kelly, is will your presentation be circulated?
Yes, I'm happy to share that. We'll pop it over to John, and yeah, happy for it to be circulated. There's the information that I presented is about 3 days out of date, but I purposely did that because actually it then becomes part of what you already have access to. So happy to do that.
Thank you, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Next, I have Councillor Gerald McGregor, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And since we're dealing with the Chinese COVID virus, may I wish you Shengri Kuala, which is happy birthday in Mandarin.
Oh, that's impressive.
So
that's
leave that one
impressive.
alone, and just say thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you very much always for your very positive response. And it's been a pleasure seeing you in action tonight. I have no questions.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Gerald McGregor. And maybe I can wish you in our language, Jarumdin Mubarak. That's in Punjabi.
It's kind of who's going to top that now?
Well, I could do it in Malay too. Selamat Hari Jadi. So you've got lots of. Okay, next I have Councillor Ron Mashisha, please.
Hello, Kelly. Thank you so much. And I think you've answered some of my questions I raised with you in an email from one of our residents. I think she's tuned in listening. So thank you so much for that. The question I have for you is that you know we've got a plan, a strategy to vaccinate our most vulnerable age brackets. How many of those are we still now left? Because I know you said we had 2,500 as of the last report. How much more do we need to go? Are we still going to meet the cutoff date of the 15th of February? But also on that point is some of our older residents in Chiswick who are still awaiting their test, and they will be obviously very nervous, anxious to get their jab. What message do you have for them to sort of reassure them that their call will be coming as soon as possible?
So the message that I have is you will be invited by your GP. We do know about you, and when you're invited, please come. That is absolutely clear. We are because of the logistics of getting the vaccination to the right place in a timely manner. There will be a very small time frame between inviting people and when their appointment will be, and probably only about 2 days, and that's because we don't get confirmation in advance with sufficient time to have that longer period of time. So just be aware that we know about you. You will be called by your GP, and when you do get called, please come and get vaccinated. In terms of the vaccine cutoff date, if we don't achieve it, it won't be because at our end we haven't done what we need to do. It will be based on we didn't get enough stock to actually deliver it. So the vaccination, we've had 2,500 vaccinations come into Chiswick. There's another 1,000 vaccinations that's coming into the borough this week, and there are 2 lots of 2,000 vaccinations that have already been done from Heart of Hounslow. We've got 7,000, well, roughly about 7,000 over 80-year-olds. Some of those will be our residents in care homes, and but a relatively small amount have been used for vaccination health and social care staff. The hospital is vaccinating social care staff as well. It's also vaccinating its staff, and the community trusts are also vaccinating their staff. So, you know, it's while the PCN, these primary care network sites are vaccinating our vulnerable residents, and the GPs are leading on that, vaccination is going on through other routes, particularly for key workers.
Yes, thank you, Kelly. Now, on just a follow-up quickly on that. When we come to a stage that you've said we've contacted everybody, but there are some of our older residents who perhaps don't have a mobile phone, or will miss their messages, or won't pick up their post. We might miss some of those people later on. How are we going to mitigate that? Can we use our communication network with mutual aid groups, WhatsApp groups on the local roads, and the networks that we've already developed in the first lockdown to pick up any of this who've sort of fallen behind the cracks. And how could we do that? How could you help us get everyone out by the or beyond the 15th of February? Well,
most residents, apart from a very few, will be registered by their GP practices. So if all of those residents who meet that age criteria will be called and invited, because by definition they are on these GP register list. Where there are people who are over the age of 80 who haven't been identified, or for some reason, we will ensure that they're followed up. I mean, I think it's fair to say I don't know what that route is, but we will ensure. I mean, it's an absolute must that we have to identify these people through any means. What we have done previously when we had the shielding list is to triangulate the information from various databases. So when we looked initially at the sort of clinically extremely vulnerable, we were at, and certainly with some of the work that we're doing on contact tracing, when we haven't got all the information, we've cross-checked it against council records to try and identify and make sure that we've got the right contact details, we can get hold of people. And in the same way, we knock on doors as well. It's not, I'd like to say it's as good as we can get it. There will no doubt be people that we will miss. I think our communications also need to reflect that we sort of send those messages out just in case people are missed so that they can contact us. But at the moment this moment in time, we are using the GP records in order to identify residents. But I will take that on board, actually, because I'm kind of aware that we probably just need to be a little bit more robust with that one.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. I think Chair is back now. John, are you there? He can't hear. Okay, so thank you, Kelly and Sam. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for taking your time out, especially on your birthday. So,
I wish I hadn't said anything now, but thank you for the
rain. That's why I did close to your birthday. I'm sorry. So happy birthday again.
Thank you very much, councillors, and I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you. So I think John, are you there? I can see him, but he's not responding. So I'll continue.
No, I'm back now. Sorry, okay. Kelly. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ranjit. Very, very informative. Can we move on to agenda item 7, please? John's got to give us an informal update. John?
My apologies, my mic was turned off. This is a very brief, just for information. The spatial planning team have started a programme of producing new conservation area appraisals for all of Hounslow's conservation areas. Now, from our point of view, the council is consulting on a new appraisal for Chiswick High Road, and also consulting on the possibility of designating the Glebe Estate as a new conservation area. The consultation opens on the 18th of January, so people just need to go to the council website, type in consultations on the search bar and give us your views.
John?
That's it, Chair.
Thank you. John, I think John is not.
Yes. Thank you, guys. And there's no other matters that consider urgent.
Gerald's hand is up, John.
I thank all the members, external presenters, council.
Some hands are up, John.
Pardon?
Yeah.
There are hands up.
First, Gerald, Gabriella.
Yes, there are hands up, but we are mindful of the time. There's just 4 minutes left.
I can't see them. I can't see.
So can Gerald raise his question?
I'll go. Thank you.
But who wants to speak then?
I just want to make a comment on this conservation stuff. You couldn't make it up, could you? You really couldn't make it up. Here we are in the middle of COVID-19, and we've had this notification that we're going to move on to something else. If we want to conserve Chiswick High Road, don't have the cycleway.
Thank you, Gerald. Ron, it's your turn, Ron.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair. Just to say that if you're going to put consultation forward, John, there needs to be not only just one form of consultation, which is drop an email, there needs to be other forms, including writing in, including speaking to residents, and all those things need to be put into account.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Gabriella.
Thank you, Ranjit. Ron, to that point, in the briefing documents online, there is a phone number that you can call, which is, I've just lost it, sorry, which is 008-583-5207.
Okay, can we? Yeah, thank you, Gabriella.
Sorry, and to an earlier point, then postal services are severely impacted within London. I think a number of us have been receiving cases on this. I have been speaking to Royal Mail due to staff shortages. Mail delivery will be at best probably once every other day, and at worst once a week. So if you are experiencing delays with your post, then please just be conscious of the strain on the current postal service.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gabriella Giles. I have Councillor Bidoff next.
Yes, thank you. Just picking up on the point that Ron made, it isn't just, and others, it isn't just a question of making it possible for them to respond in certain ways. You've got to reach them in certain ways. And in particular, thinking about reaching up, going up to the timeline, that's shorthand for Turner Green Terrace. And that's a road of shops, many of which have been forced to close during the pandemic. You cannot consult people who aren't there. And there is also the added point about both and any consultation about any conservation area anywhere is you've got to allow, find a method of getting to landlords. An awful lot of properties are rented and tenants won't do anything with their letters. In a lot of cases, they just go straight into the bin. They've got no means of getting to the property owners. And in particular, you've just got to be, I suppose what I'm saying is this is the wrong time to start a conservation area, a consultation on particularly Turner Green Terrace. With Glebe Estate, it might be more residential, but the terrace, you simply can't do it whilst retailers are not allowed to work. They won't be going to their premises.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bidoff. I think, John, are you there? No. Okay, I think
I am, yes.
Okay,
yeah,
do you want to take over?
Okay. Can I apologise for we've got a very poor signal here. Are there any other points members want to raise, or we
no, John.
Can't see any hands or messages.
No, we just got one more minute before.
Okay.
Sorry, Gerald, sorry, John, that was me raising the point about the postal services before. Apologies.
It's no problem at all, and I apologise for stopping her. Thanks, Randy. I think we've had some exceptional speakers tonight.
Yes, we did.
And very constructive questions. So thank you for all your contribution. Can I thank you, the external presenters, council officers and others, including ICT and comms. I now formally close the meeting, and again, thank you for all your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Laura.